Hello everyone, welcome back to another one of our Bible studies and episode reviews in Shady Oak Ministries. I'm of course Shady Oak, and today we're going to be discussing episode 10 of season 8 of the TV show My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, the episode The Break Up Breakdown, based on the popular song. I'd say that subjectively, but nonetheless, what we're going to talk about today, though they laid out the moral pretty much straightforwardly for us in that, eavesdropping, lack of communication, definitely not building blocks upon a successful relationship. But instead of just emphasizing the biblical themes grounded in that, in which there are some, I instead want to focus on the topic of relationships themselves and provide a biblical perspective using today's episode as the active illustration to meet on common ground with those things. So if you've ever wondered, non-Christian or Christian listening, what the Christian perspective is, what the biblical perspective is on relationships, and would perhaps benefit in being met halfway and seeing how today's episode illustrated it, I encourage you to listen along with us as we begin in the book of 1 John, not John, just John, the Gospel of John, but 1 John chapter 4, verse 18. We're writing about the nature of love as opposed to fear. This will be the verse that we essentially build our study around here today. 1 John 4 and verse 18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves torment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. Essentially, John's point is that fear and love cancel each other out. You can have one or the other, but the existence of one makes no room for the other. And we oftentimes confuse the two because we don't always understand what they are. But my goal here today is to use today's episode to illustrate what each are defined as, fear and love. Let's start with that first one. What is fear? Well, fear is a natural emotion that helps preserve our lives. And that is a good thing. The fight or flight response is very effective at keeping me safe. However, that only works for you. It's not for defining relationships. If fight or flight is all that fear does, if that's all that takes place in your relationship, how does that look when you take a step back and say, what is that relationship like? Well, they're always either fighting or running from each other. That sounds like something you'd see on a sitcom, but not exactly what you'd call a healthy marriage, now would it? And that's the whole point. 2 Timothy 1 verse 17 says, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Now, with these three in mind, think about what we saw in today's episode. When Big Mac presumed Sugar Belle was going to break up with him, his heart was in fight or flight mode, right? Did this make his relationship with her stronger or weaker? Did it make him more loving towards her in order to preserve the relationship, or more callous and capable of a presumptive breakup? Did it help him see reality, or make him think that discord was a sound source of relationship advice? Not a lot of power, love, or sanity, for that matter, when fear ends up defining relationships, now is there? Secondly, as far as the definition of fear goes, I think the case has been made. But love, now that's a more complicated issue. And not always because it needs to be, but because our culture has made it the case. And that's not entirely their fault, not only with a fallen heart, but a limited language. The English language only gives us one word to describe a variety of different kinds of interactions that we'd call loving. If I love peanuts or I love my girlfriend, we assume that means two different things, correct? Well, understand, that's why, and partially, the majority of the New Testament was written in Greek, because they actually had 4 different words for love. And they were the following. It was phileo, eros, storge, and agape. And if you aren't a Greek scholar, don't worry, I'll walk you through these. The 4 different ways that these words essentially mean would be admiration, what we'd consider friendship, just enjoying being around somebody. That is a form of love. Likewise, affection, a loving act or kindness. That is another expression of love, something tangible. Likewise, attraction is a legitimate form of love. The term eros, we get the term erotic from it, and it's not to say always in a perverse sense. It just means pertaining to the senses. It's something that we can tangibly experience. I love peanuts, right? It's not necessarily referring to something erotic in the internet sense, but in the biological sense. There's a good taste, there's a good smell, there's a good sensation when I am eating them. That's the point. It is a form of love. And then lastly, agape is a very unique word. And originally it just was referring to this universal love that goes beyond the human experience. But the best way it was defined was as self-sacrifice. And if you want more on this, I encourage you to look up on your own time 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 8. Just play-by-through description of the character of Jesus Christ. But that's the best way to understand agape. Not just as self-sacrifice, but the character of God. And that's ultimately the standard that we look to love to be, because 1 John 4 and verse 8 lays that down for us. Whoever does not love, that word agape in the original Greek, does not know God, because God is love. It's not something he does, it's who he is by nature. Now, how do we see that acted out in history? How can we get a demonstration of this kind of love if God is a spirit, right? We don't have a physical... we do. Jesus Christ was us getting to see God's heart with skin on. And when he came to this world that essentially treated him like Sugar Belle, that presumed the worst of him, and left a relationship with him, separation from the source of not only life, but everything good, resulted in the definition of evil, separation from good. The introduction of death, separation from life. Everything that we would call wrong with this world were the natural consequences of that severed relationship. And these horrific consequences were not only done on the universe as a whole, in that now, as a law, things die, things break down, and things are just naturally selfish, especially us. But that's the real kicker, is that not only has the universe been physically impacted, but so have we spiritually. We are called, according to Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 1, very glowingly dead in our trespasses and sins. That our rebellion against God has just made us by nature hate everything by default that is by definition good. And again, without the presence of our conscience, we wouldn't have anything but self-destructive and self-annihilating tendencies to define our lives in every waking moment. We just call that plain out mercy, that we haven't destroyed ourselves already. And if you look at the world today, you can see we're getting pretty close to that. But understand the point that's being made here. Instead of letting us remain in that state that we chose, he personally made himself a part of our suffering and took on more suffering than anyone else has ever had in history. Why? Well, look at all four definitions of love. His desire for a relationship, wanting to be with us, phileo, was demonstrated, storge, an act of kindness, through an act that would see us restored back to a relationship with him by paying for the wrong things that we have done. Then, by proposing a committed relationship through his self-sacrifice, he gives us the choice to be with him again. Now, question, why did Jesus have to suffer in order to show love? Well, the easiest way you could answer that is because that's how love works. And instead of me going on just in these treatises for you, I'd like to quote C.S. Lewis in his lecture, The Four Loves, which discussed this exact same topic. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries, and void all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, and airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell. Now think about that for a second. The discord approach to relationships. If I don't love anybody, then I can never get my heart broken, right? I'm safe from harm, but you end up like that. And that's the whole point in all of this. It's not whether or not we are able to, with our free will, fully comprehend the length, the depth, the height of what God's love is towards us. He gives us the full rights to reject it. But understand this as well. When that love is returned, it wasn't in any way us deserving His affection. It wasn't us having to put ourselves out there and hope that God reciprocated. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 19 says, "We love Him because He first loved us." When it comes to the love of God, you don't have to worry about a rejection. You don't have to worry about a breakup. Given all that He spent to redeem you, it shows value. Given the price He was willing to pay to secure a relationship with you forever, shows commitment. In the same way, a wedding ring, right? The bigger the diamond, the more you show that, man, you are sincere in keeping this promise because you put a hefty down payment on showing exactly how much you love this person. Here's the whole point. If this is how God's demonstrated His love, if this is the definition of what love is, the presence of all four established in self-sacrifice, not in the hopeless pursuit of pleasure, not in something that's just popular because culture tells us so, not in just doing nice things for their own sake, but for the purpose, not of selfishness, but self-sacrifice, seeking the benefit of another, even at the cost of yourself. You see something that would preserve a relationship eternally. Not in getting Derpy's mailing system and pies mixed up, because it won't presume these things, because it's willing to suffer. Because imagine that, if Big Mac had just waited for the conversation to come, the breakup would have never have happened. But because of a fallen nature, or rather a fallen input on Discord's part, we saw some conflict that never needed to happen. Well, understand that's the work that God wants to do in your heart and mine, to make us capable of not only recognizing God as a one worth trusting, but also, catch this, who Himself demonstrated a love unlike anything this world has ever seen. We can confirm not only His death in history, but the reasons He gave for it and His resurrection, proving that that exchange worked, that His relationship with you will not only save you from death, but give you a life worth living now. Understand it's not easy, but also understand this. Love is not easy, but is it worthwhile? Well, if we were to ask Him, was His act of love towards you and me, what He went through on that cross, literally experiencing hell so that we wouldn't have to, was it worth it to Him? He would say absolutely. And that's the kind of love that God has not only demonstrated towards you, but offers a personal relationship with you here and now. Thank you for your time in listening to the study. If you have any sincere questions, ask them. If you'd like to encourage the ministry, do so. But most importantly, if you know someone who perhaps has seen today's episode, is familiar with the idea of the hearts and hooves day mentality, but perhaps not the difference between fear and love, and would benefit from hearing this message, please share it with them. Thank you for your time and listening to the study. Remember that Jesus loves you, and most importantly, remember what that love looked like. Not just a kind act in seeking your redemption, not just a kindness that desired to be with you forever. Not just something that can be tangibly seen in pleasure and in pain, but one that was done through self-sacrifice, that at any cost He would seek your benefit. That's the kind of God that has not only said that He loves you, but offers you the choice to accept or reject it.